As we said, top of the show, Microsoft shares, well, they're higher today. On news, the company has hired Sam Altman after this weekend's chaos at OpenAI. For what this really means for investors betting on the AI arms race, let's bring in CNBC contributors Alex Kantrowitz of Big Technology and Malcolm Ethridge of CIC Wealth. So it's great to have you both with us. Alex, I'll begin with you first. Is this really the done deal that some are suggesting? I've seen something from The Verge earlier which says Altman's still trying to return to OpenAI as the CEO.
I don't think it's over yet. I mean, until we go like a week after this crisis, right? We can't really say it's over. There have been so many twists and turns over the past week that, like, you're not just going to call it now. And we do know that 700 OpenAI employees have said that either the board installs Sam and Greg Brockman back in the company or they're going to follow them to Microsoft. It's not quite feasible that they all go to Microsoft, but this is a power play, and it might work. So there is a chance that at the end of all this, we do end up seeing Sam Altman back at OpenAI with a new board.
That would be remarkable, just given all the things that have happened over the last, not even handful of days. Let's just say that Sam does, in fact, go to Microsoft. Does it help them get further ahead? Or does the chaos that's ensued at OpenAI give others a chance to catch up? Because you know what the narrative was. After Microsoft did the original deal, it was like, wow, these guys have blown everybody out of the water. Alphabet's taken a step back, blew their opportunity. But now, I don't know. What do you think?
I think the real answer is both, right? Now, Microsoft has 18,000 customers working on OpenAI's service through Azure. So Sam Altman going over to Microsoft, that's going to throw that into chaos. All these clients now are looking at other options. They're looking at Anthropic. They're calling Google and they're saying, what can you do for us? They're calling everybody else. And so they do potentially risk losing those clients. And by the way, they also risk losing employees. Like, who's going to stay for this long in the middle of this chaos? Some of your best researchers might go elsewhere, and that could help bring up the level of competition in a place like Google or in a place like Amazon. But in the long term, if Sam Altman does stay, what you end up having is them rebuilding some of these models within Microsoft, and then those work much more seamlessly inside Teams, inside Excel, inside Word, as the co-pilot that Satya Nadella has been telling us about. Now he doesn't have to worry about somebody else's technology. He has it in-house with Sam Altman running the show, but that could be another couple of years because they're going to have to rebuild these models from scratch if they're going to do it within Microsoft.
But what happens if OpenAI, in fact, does go slower? Because if you believe that was part of the friction within the company, unease with just how fast this was being commercialized in terms of ChatGPT, Copilot, and the like, does that hurt Microsoft's efforts if OpenAI sort of takes a step back and says we need to breathe a little bit more before we just race this technology out to market?
Absolutely, it hurts Microsoft because it's not just the OpenAI show anymore. Maybe a year ago, OpenAI released ChatGPT, they shipped GPT-4, they were leading the field, and all these other companies were trying to figure out how to catch up. Now they've caught up because they were building on top of commoditized technology that Google introduced, the transformer model. And OpenAI was just the best step productizing it. So now that everybody's caught up, let's say OpenAI, their new CEO says, we're going to put our foot on the brake. Think everybody else is going to put their foot on the brake? No, foot on the gas, right? And they're going to surpass OpenAI if it takes this pause. And that's why this idea of AI safety, which maybe this entire coup was built on, it's kind of a crazy idea. We're not going to have a development of AI that's going to happen safely just because of the way that this works, right? This technology is out there. People want to build. They're going to develop whatever they can. And it's going to be open source. It's going to be released by multiple partners. Nobody has a monopoly on this development, not OpenAI and not anybody else.
Yeah, it's why I wanted to get your opinion so much, Malcolm, because, let's remind our viewers on this show where you so publicly came on and said, you know what, Alphabet blew it. And I'm selling that stock as a result of them, in your mind, at least ceding the lead to Microsoft. Now, what do you think?
So I think I'm actually in a little bit different camp from you guys, or at least how you started the conversation, in the sense that I don't know that it's still an open conversation where Sam Altman goes, and the likelihood that Microsoft, again, is the really big winner after all of this chaos, right? They probably started the weekend thinking, oh my God, this is a crisis that's going to end up seeing us cede some of the dominance and some of this early adopter opportunity that we created, to now you fast forward 48 hours and OpenAI probably did Microsoft one of the biggest favors it could have possibly done with this unforced error, in that it brought the talent, Sam Altman and his top lieutenants, over to Microsoft and said, irrespective of what OpenAI's doomsdayers want to do with regard to going slow, we have the product guy, right? Sam Altman was not the engineer behind the scenes creating the model itself. As Alex said, that was a Google product, right? That was built once upon a time by Google. What he did was bring products that actually were interesting to consumers and allowed people to interact with AI in the way that we now know ChatGPT, which is his core talent. And so by bringing that in-house at Microsoft, he can focus and his team can focus solely on applying all of that know-how to Microsoft and entrenching them even deeper into their lead as the dominant powerhouse in the AI arms race.
You want to respond to that?
I think Sam does stay at Microsoft. I'm not saying it's likely he's going to go back to OpenAI, just acknowledging that there's a possibility. But what Malcolm's saying is not in the nature of Sam Altman. He doesn't want to build high-power Clippy. He wants to build generational, world-changing technology. He might have a chance to do this at Microsoft. It's going to happen slowly. You know, it's not going to be 700 OpenAI employees jumping over because they need to maintain the service that they've sold to thousands of clients. So it's going to start slow. He might end up picking some of his best, he's already picked some best lieutenants, but basically looking at the roster and seeing who he wants to rebuild with. And, that's a good outcome for Microsoft, obviously. For Sam, the people that I speak with, they're not quite sure he's going to want to stay and do that forever. And I think that's a reasonable perspective.
I feel like, Malcolm, you sound like a shareholder who wants to get bigger in Microsoft and not entertain the idea that either Amazon through Anthropic or Alphabet itself could become the player that Microsoft appears to be today. And it sounds like you think they've pulled off a tremendous coup here.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like what Dan Ives is to Apple, right? I am way further into the Microsoft camp when it comes to the conversation on AI now following this, right? Assuming the cards do fall the way early reporting says they would, Microsoft has the pick of the litter as far as some of the AI engineers and other tech talent that's, forget threatening, that's actually already walked out of the door and is now booking tickets to go to Seattle, right? So I'm thinking that Microsoft manages to take this lead and run with it, and I don't think they have to worry so much about are we cannibalizing or are we hurting our partner in the way that they would have before, because you don't surprise the CEO of Microsoft with an announcement like this a minute before you actually make the decision. You bring a partner like that who's a 49% stakeholder into the conversation as you're considering making these moves. Otherwise, you run the risk of them taking the war chest, right? The tens of billions of dollars they have in cash sitting on the balance sheet and putting that to work to bring these things in-house and no longer even have to have a conversation or worry that their flank is unprotected ever again in dealing with OpenAI.
See, the thing is, if you do what Malcolm suggests you can do and why he is optimistic as optimistic as he is, if you bring the entire thing in-house, don't you then incur a level of cost that you did not necessarily have before? And doesn't that change the financial dynamics, at least for the balance sheet and the way that investors need to view what this company is going to spend, again, perhaps more than it initially intended, and when they're going to be able to fully monetize that?
Yeah, I don't think Microsoft is too worried about the cost. I mean, it's 700 employees, now very well-paid employees. I don't think they're bringing everybody over. And then it's Azure, right? Basically, the big thing that in the investment was the Azure credits that Microsoft made. This $13 billion they were putting in OpenAI, it was compute. Well, they have that compute in-house. And now the OpenAI team can use that to train whatever new model they're building on. So for me, the cost to Microsoft, money-wise, not a big problem. It's liability. Do they really want to sit behind some of these big models and take, the flack for whatever these folks who want to push the status quo forward as fast as they can? Like, does Satya Nadella want to be in front of Congress and say, yep, I built that? No, he'd much rather have Sam Altman do it. That's why they had the investment in OpenAI, right? So I think there's the reputational cost, the money isn't a big deal, and then there's the time. This was all working very stably, the partnership. I mean, Sam Altman and Satya Nadella, if you see a conference stage in Silicon Valley, they were standing there together. Now you're going to have to rebuild from scratch, and that partnership gets shaken up. So the question is how fast they can do that. It's not going to be snap your fingers and get these models working right off the bat. It takes time, and that time could be costly.
Malcolm, lastly to you, we're going to be talking about AI a lot tomorrow, of course, as we lead up to overtime. And oh yeah, NVIDIA, a stock that was $400 on Halloween, which as I look now is over $500. So it's at the highs of the day. It's up 2 1/3%. It's near $505. What should we expect here?
Yeah, so I think for one thing, Scott, I want to go back to a statement that you made to me last time I was at Post 9 with you, which was, this is why it's so tough to try and time your way in and out of these mega caps, because you just never have any clue what is the next thing that's going to happen, conversationally at least. But I think for NVIDIA, the conversation has now shifted from Microsoft is trying to compete with them in the chip space to the incumbents have now been solidified, in my opinion, as the dominant winners for years to come as it relates to AI, simply because if I'm an investor and I'm looking at startup opportunities, can I really trust that the AI doomers and the zoomers who want to go slow and go fast are going to be able to get on one accord inside a startup? Or am I worried that my however many millions of dollars of investment will be obliterated the moment a board has a meeting and decides they're going to make a big decision in a vacuum that, all of a sudden I have no wherewithal except maybe 1 minute before the decision is made. And so I think for an NVIDIA and others who compete in this space, they now have less to worry about from AI competitors than they did before Friday.
Wow, interesting. We'll leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you. Malcolm, we'll talk to you soon. Of course, Alex, good to see you here at Post 9 once again.